Hello, I'm Jay. Welcome to the Forbidden Files. The case we're gonna talk about today happened in Britain during World War II. It's been over 70 years till now. There have been countless speculations, all of them seem to be irrational. But there is some kind of inscrutable connection. Till this day, her identity remains unknown. This case has become one of the most famous unsettled cases, which is called Bella in Elm. On April 18, 1943, Europe was engulfed in the fire of World War II. The war not only affected the mood of British citizens, but also put many families in danger of food shortage. There were 4 teenagers in Birmingham decided to go to the woods of Hagley Wood, thinking if they could get a rabbit, they would feed themselves and their families. But for these hungry teenagers, it's good to just have anything to eat. For example, boiled eggs would be a good choice. 2 of the teenagers, Bob and Thomas, were watching every tree on the road, hoping to get a few eggs and have a good meal. An elm tree with an odd shape caught their eye. Thomas vaguely saw a white round object inside the tree hole. He excitedly called Bob over to go up and check it out. Bob swiftly climbed the elm tree in a few moves. He reached into the hole with a wooden stick, thinking he was getting the boiled eggs and eat them, and his stomach grumbled. But the things made their faces turn pale. Those were not boiled eggs, it's a human skull. Some skin that had not finished decaying was stuck. There were even a few hairs left on the scalp. Bob was so scared that he almost fell out of the tree. This scary skull made these teenagers feel sick and lose their appetite. They immediately threw the skull back into the hole, and to avoid being punished for poaching, they agreed that they would tell this to nobody. Thomas, the youngest, went home and lost his sleep. In fear, he told his father about it. His father immediately chose to call the police. Thomas brought the police to the elm tree. The elm tree was about 6 feet tall. There is a hole in the tree of about 43 centimeters. The police examined the tree and pulled out an almost complete skeleton. Some pieces of clothing, a pair of shoes and a gold wedding ring were found in the hole. The only missing part was the hand bones. After the subsequent search, the police found the hand bones not far from the tree. Forensic pathologist Webster deduced that the victim's age is around 25 to 40 years old, possibly about 35, and had been pregnant before. The victim had been dead for at least 18 months. She was probably alive, or at least there is still body heat on her before entering. It was impossible to stuff a body in a tree hole. No sign of violence was showed on her body, but there was taffeta stuffed in the mouth. Webster thought the cause might be asphyxiation. When asked about the possibility of suicide, Webster looked a little weary. He said, why a person could get inside a tree, even if she was small without any training. It would be impossible to stuff herself in a tree hole. However, nothing was found at the scene that could identify the victim. It is difficult to match the list with her during World War II. The police could only release the case information, hoping to get some clues from the outside. But 10 more days later, they didn't get any valuable clues. Webster was anxious about this. He sympathized with what happened to this lady. After a careful examination, he finally found a clue to identify the victim. This victim's lower jaw incisors were unevenly spaced and one tooth was missing. Judging from the skeletal traces, it was extracted within a year before the death. The victim might have orthodontics at the clinic. So on May 4th, police published an announcement in the news, calling for leads from dentists in the city. But no leads or clues were brought to the police, as if this woman had never been in the city before. Until March 1944, some light came to the case. Graffiti appeared on a building in Birmingham. who put Bella down the Wych Elm Hagley Wood. A year later, this was the first time for identity of the body. In another house that had recently been vandalized, similar graffiti appeared. Who put Bella in the Wych Elm? These two pieces of graffiti brought back the case to the people after a year. The police thought the killer was provoking them, so they notified all the citizens that whoever knew a missing woman named Bella must report to the police. Also for this reason, this case was later called Bella in Elm. Unfortunately, there's still no one named Bella or let Bella match the victim. Now, the police lost all the clues, and Bella in Elm became an unsettled case. But because of that, the case also caught the attention of Donald McCormick. Donald was a British journalist, also a historian, who worked for naval intelligence during WW2. He had a keen interest in these horrific unsolved cases and espionage. He had written dozens of works on unsolved secrets. Donald read a great deal of material on the Bella case. He found that Hagley Wood was a witch-gathering place. He even pointed out an ancient tradition that embedding the soul of a witch in an empty tree, using the empty tree as a cage to prevent the dead witch from using her black magic, which would bring more disasters to the world. Interestingly, there were signs showed that the tree was occasionally pruned. The pruning prevented it from growing properly. The hole in the tree was possibly created as a result. As if to confirm Donald's suspicions, in 1945, an anthropologist or archaeologist from University of London, Margaret Murray, proposed a rather radical theory. She argued that there were cult believers in England. She called them devil worshippers. These people had a ritual called the Hand of Honor. The ritual involves cutting off one hand of the victims after killing them in the sacrifice. However, whether it's Donald's or Margaret, their speculations lacked evidence. And the British police firmly claimed that the reason why Bella's hand bones were found was because that a fox or a squirrel had moved it. There was no severed sign by a sharp instrument. This theory was proved to be wrong. It brought Donald's investigation into a dilemma, as it was for the police. In 19,539 years after the last graffiti was found, the police finally admitted that they might wrong. The graffiti was probably drawn by a lunatic, who was happy to see the police had no clues, and he had nothing to do with this case. The victim's name probably was not even Bella. The police's comments made Donald almost give up. But just a few months later, a letter brought a new twist to the story. In November 1953, a letter was received by a newspaper in Wolverhampton. The sender claimed that she knew the true identity of the woman in the elm tree and who killed her. He wrote in the letter, "You will never solve this. The one who has the answer is beyond the jurisdiction of the district court. This case is closed. No witches, black magic, and midnight rituals." The responsible man was died of lunacy in 1942. The victim entered England illegally in 1941. The sender left no surname in the letter, only one simple name, Anna. The police were dispatched to search for this Anna. Not long after, they interrogated the person who sent the letter. Anna told the police that her real name is Una Mossop. Jack Mossop, her husband, was a pilot in the Royal Air Force. But he got involved in the espionage network and operations in UK. And the woman in the elm was a spy. Her mission was to locate the German air raid sites. On that day, the victim and a spy named Van Ralt drove together to pick up Una's husband, Jack. But soon after, the two spies had some disagreements. It was probably about the spying organization. Ralt then knocked the victim unconscious and put her in an elm tree. When she woke up, she found that she could not escape. She eventually died in a hole in the tree. Una said that no matter what the two men did, her husband, Jack, couldn't sleep at night. He repeatedly dreamed of a woman gazing from a tree, which severely affected his mental state. Long before the victim was found by the four teenagers, her husband had already died in a mental hospital. However, the police questioned about Una's testimony. Because if what she said is true, why she chose to tell the police after 10 years of his husband's death? The police thought what Una said was only hearsay. The war made wives lost their husbands and families. It was common for widows to fabricate stories. But whether what Una said is true or not, it inspired Donald. To verify Una's story, Donald decided to go to Holland to look for some clues. There, he found that the victim was a spy. Donald learned that the Nazi was recruiting espionage into Britain and trained them as spies. They had recruited a woman who was living in Birmingham in the 1930s. She knew enough about England and almost had no Dutch accent. Records also showed that during March and April in 1941, in the Sea Lion project launched by Germany, 5 German spies were sent from Holland to England. One of the female spies was named Clara. Her landing site was in Hagley Wood. But Clara never contacted her superiors. After landing and was filed as missing, MI5 files declassified by the British National Archives had also confirmed that in 1941, a spy named Joseph Jacobs was arrested while parachuting into Cambridge, England. This Joseph had a picture of a woman in his possession. Her name was Clara Bowery. Joseph claimed that this woman was her girlfriend. The Third Reich had recruited her as a spy. They were trained together and on missions together. Clara would have infiltrated the West Midlands, but Joseph didn't get any news from her. All the clues seemed to lead to one fact, that the Bella was the German spy Clara Bowery. However, this woman named Clara was about 5'8" tall, which is almost about the same height as the elm tree. But Bella in the elm tree was only 5 feet tall. No matter how close the previous clues, they were all defeated by a simple fact like that. In 1968, Donald published his investigation of the case in a book called Murder by Witchcraft. But he didn't come up with the identity of Bella. Was Clara Bowery the spy that Ina mentioned? Or it was someone else? The surname of Clara was Bowery. The pronunciation is similar to Bella. Is that just a coincidence? Sadly, Bella's body and bones have been lost over the decades. Now, it's impossible to identify Bella using DNA. In 2018, researchers at the University of Liverpool did the forensic facial reconstruction by using the photos of Bella's skull in the archive to recreate her real look. But still, no one can recognize who she was. Perhaps Bella's identity will dissipate in the dust of history with those died in the war.